Awareness is always there and it's never changing, right? So we get tripped up because we practice being aware of thoughts or being aware of the space between thoughts, right? And the you that's practicing is the awareness in disguise. This is the thing about meditation. Meditation is an opportunity to discover that the game's over. It's an opportunity to discover that what it is to accomplish or achieve as far as meditation is concerned is not necessary. Because the only thing possible that you could accomplish or achieve is to experience the freedom of this awareness that you are, in essence, yes? But you can't accomplish it. The attempts to accomplish it, see, it's kind of like I want to expose the game. The attempts to accomplish it are attempts being made by the idea that you have of who you are, yes? The attempts to accomplish it are attempts being made by the idea that you have of who you are. And the awareness that you are is there all the time while you're doing that, right? So you're operating as if you're operating as if the object that you are in awareness, you're operating as if the idea you have of yourself is the awareness, right? You're operating as if the idea you have of yourself is the awareness, trying to be the awareness. When the idea you have of yourself is in the awareness. These practices that are progressive, even the guided meditation that we listen to, right, is it's a con job. It's a con job because, and he gives you a hint at the end of the guided meditation, because when he says, and you become the Buddha that you are, if you understand what he's talking about when he says that, he's basically pointing to the idea that you already are that. And if during the meditation up until that point he's talking to you, the you that you think you are is meditating, the you that you think you are is meditating. And so he's saying, to be that you and sit still and be aware of all that comes and goes. Right? So he's talking to you that you think you are, but he's relating to that you as if you are the awareness. And then in the end he says, oh, in the end, if you practice awareness, you end up getting everything, meaning that you end up experiencing everything that happens, right, in life without conditioning, But you get to hold it with compassion and kindness and love, and you become the Buddha that you are. So I say, why not just become the Buddha that you are now, instead of trying to become that? Because if it's already the case that you are that Buddha, and Buddha, by the word Buddha, just means awareness. You could call it consciousness, it doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that you understand what it is, and what it is you. Shorthand is what it is you. And the you that it is was here before who you think you are showed up. Right? That's evidence that it is you, because it was here before you learned your name. It was here before who you think you are showed up. It's the first person. It's not a person, but it's the first. So does it make sense? If you already are that, does it make sense to simply be it? Does that make sense? So then, now watch. So then it does make sense, right? So go ahead and be it. What happens when you go be it?
Try to be something different. It's yourself. You go back into the duality of that.
Okay, you slip back into identifying with your thoughts. You slip back into identifying with your feelings. You slip back into identifying with your body. You slip back into identifying with your history. You slip back into identifying with all the things you were identifying yourself as. That's just what happens, right? So what good is the idea that you already are it and you're just going to be it? What good is it? Right? When you go to be it, you're not it. So now what? But what I want to know is, because even if you meditate, and when you're meditating, you do experience peace, and you do experience clarity, right? And you do experience being grounded and centered the way awareness is. Whether you know yourself as awareness or not, that in that situation, because you're more present, because you're paying attention to the breath, and the breath is present, right? That because you're more present, you begin to experience the Buddhahood. You begin to experience this peace, this serenity, this clarity, which is often the case if you practice meditation consistently over time. But then, when you're finished practicing meditation and you get up and you go back into the traffic of life, everything comes back in on you, right? And so, if the only time you experience peace and the only time you experience the truth of who you are is when you're meditating, that's got some value, but the real value, right, the real possibility, what we really want more than anything else is to be able to experience that as you're going through your life. Because life is challenging, right? Because you face difficulties in your life. You face emotional reactions. You face the challenges of having a physical body and getting old and getting sick. And life doesn't always go well. There's ups and downs. Your emotions go up and down. Your thoughts are changing all the time. Everything's changing. It's impermanent. So the real application, the real fulfillment of the possibility is to experience that as you move through your life. Not just that, or else you can go live in a cave. Right? And then you don't have to worry about getting upset because there's nobody around. Or in a monastery where everything is highly structured, right? But that's not for us, right? And if it's possible to actually realize who we are and be that in life, wouldn't that be the ultimate, right? Because then you can be at the party. Then you can be in the activity. Then you can have all of what life has to offer when you're participating in the world, right? But at the same time, you're peaceful and you're centered and you're quiet. So how can you have this happen? Just try this on. That is to know that you know who you are. To know that you know that you're awareness, even when you're not being that. Do you understand? Once you discover yourself experientially, once you experience that the awareness that is there is you, right? Once you get that, like it's confirmed, right? You got to get it confirmed, right? That it's not a belief. Once you're convinced that that's the case, right? Even if you are not being that, can you remember that that's the case?
Yes.
See, what I'm suggesting is that if you can do that, now maybe in the beginning you may need to have reminders like beads or something, I don't know, sticky notes, whatever the case may be. But I think that where you want to get to is you want to get to the place that you are aware of who you actually are, even when what you're being is identified with your thinking and your feelings and the situation you're in. Now, the reason I say that is because I'm suggesting to you that that's the beginning of the end. That's the beginning of the end. Because if you're aware that the truth of yourself is awareness in relationship to what you're identified with at any particular time, right? then what will happen is the way that things are occurring for you will gradually start to undo, because now it is in relationship to the truth. So it's not. So then it's not a matter of being totally lost or awake, right? Then it's not a matter of being totally lost or awake. Then it's a matter of being, even when I'm lost, I still know the truth of myself, even if the truth that I know of myself is a concept right at this moment. It's not something I'm actually experiencing, right? But nonetheless, I'm convinced. Here's another way of saying this. You all know where you live, right? Where your house is, right? Do you have to go through the day like reminding yourself over and over again where your house is so you don't forget where to go? Right? So you see, it's the same type of thing. When a child first learns its name, right, they have to, when you don't remember this, but it's nonetheless true. When you first learn your name as a child, in the beginning somebody may call your name and you don't answer because you haven't really established yourself, right, as that name. But now if somebody calls your name, do you have to think of whether that's you? Right? It's like established, right? So in the same way, you can establish yourself as the awareness, right? In the beginning, it may be a matter of consciously and intentionally exercising your ability to recognize awareness when you're not meditating. Consciously and intentionally using your ability to recognize awareness when you're not meditating, right? Not even necessarily being upset, right? But just have it be, it's like the same thing. You know, the way you remember where you live is that when you first move there, right? When you first move there, you may for a while have to think about, okay, you know, what are the directions I have to take to get to my house? But after a while, that requires nothing anymore, right? Knowing your name requires nothing anymore. So could you get related to the experience of yourself as awareness like that? What would that take? Yeah, it would take practice, but it would take intentional, consistent practice, not just in meditation, right? And the thing that would motivate, now here's the hitch, right? Is that when we are in a state of identification with thoughts and feelings, right? Part of that state of identification is we are being who we think we are. That's the hitch. It's like hypnosis. You're in a hypnotic state. You're being who you think you are, right? So it's not so easy just to remember that you're the awareness, because you're being who you think you are. So what's going to break the trance? See, now we're dealing with the intensity of the identification, right? It's got a hypnotic quality to it, right? Your identification with the identity, with the idea you have of yourself has got a hypnotic quality to it. So it's not just that you're identified with your body and with your personality and so forth. You're actually considering that to be you. That's the hypnotic part, right? You're in that experience hypnotically. So how do you get out? Okay, but you could understand that you're not the person, but that's not going to change what tends to happen automatically in terms of finding yourself in the world of the person. And when you're totally in the world of the person, you're just, the idea of who you really are is not present. You know, when you're in the middle of an angry reaction, right? It's not there at all. When you're feeling strong emotions, it's not there at all. See, I mean, I think this is important to understand, you know, because we have to, you know, this is like escaping from a prison, right? We have to have a plan here. We have to have something that makes sense in terms of it's going to work to get out. Because it is like a prison, you know, the state of mind that people live their life in is very limited and confining, right? Like a prison. One of the greatest teachers, George Gurdjieff, actually used that metaphor, you know, that it's like a prison. I suspect that even when people meditate, a lot of times, and I heard the Dalai Lama comment on this, you know, he said about his own monks, he said, don't kid yourself, they're sleeping a lot of the time. So, and for a lot of people who really don't understand meditation, right, they think they're meditating, right? Who they think they are is sitting there meditating. That's not meditation. So that's another subject, right? But what's it going to take to be awake? That's the question. What's it going to take to stay awake? If you believe you can get there through effort or by trying, that's part of the problem because it's not true. So every attempt you make to get to where you already are is taking you away from it. So what's it gonna take to stay awake? Because that's all it takes, is to just be awake, right? It's not going anywhere, it's not changing anything, it's just being awake. But you have to see, you have to be aware of the catch, you know, to try and stay awake. Who is it that's trying to stay awake? Just the idea that you're trying to stay awake has you be different than awareness. So here's what needs to happen is you have to be aware of the cost of being asleep. You really have to get it in your bones of the cost of being asleep, so much so that the idea of not being awake is so unacceptable. One of the Buddhist monks that was imprisoned in China after the Chinese invaded Tibet and so forth, and he was in prison for many, many years, and he finally got free, and he was with the Dalai Lama in India, and in one of their conversations the Dalai Lama said to him, "What was the most difficult time you had when you were in China in prison?" And he said, "The most difficult time I had was one day I almost hated the people who were torturing me." So if you can get the view, that he had, that monk had, right? It's like that's how unacceptable it was for him to lose contact with the truth. You have to, you know, one of the things that I've said here is that you have to get what's at stake. You have to get what's at stake, which is your life. Your life is on the line. The way the teachers talk about this is they say that the resolution of the delusion, right? The delusion, you know, the delusion that you have about who you are, the resolution of the delusion, the cure for the ignorance, right, is to understand, right, that there's a misunderstanding, to understand that there is a misconception, that there's confusion, that you're in a state of confusion. And so it's not about becoming what you are, it's about knowing when you're not being that you're not being that. Do you follow me? So you can't become what you already are, but you can notice when you're not being that, right? That's what I'm talking about. Notice when you're not being that. Now, if you notice that you're not being that, you're not trying to get to that, you're not trying to be that, right? You're just seeing the illusion. You're just seeing the illusion. When you see a mirage as a mirage, you don't relate to it as if it's water. So all you have to do is see it for what it is. See it as it is. That's not changing anything, just seeing it as it is. That the whole purpose of meditation is simply to notice the awareness. Just to notice the awareness. And then, of course, as you say, it's absolutely necessary for you to have the conviction that it is who you are, and that conviction has to be experiential. It can't be a belief. That won't be strong enough. It won't be strong enough. It has to be experiential, that you have to know that this is the truth, this is real, this is authentic, And then the game's on. You know, you can't see, that's the other thing. Once you have the experience of it directly, you can't go back, right? You can't go back. You can't forget that. You can't. You can, no longer can you go back and be something that you're not. And in the end, even when, see, this is the thing. In the end, even when you're being the person and thinking the person's thoughts and having the person's feelings, right? You will be being the awareness, because that is the awareness too. There isn't two. It's not like there's the person and the awareness. That is the awareness. And when it gets to the point where you know that that's the awareness, then there's a highly accelerated process of your personality changing in the direction of maturity, in the direction of becoming an expression of awareness itself, rather than the way most people's personality is. Because, you know, one of the things that's at stake in your life is the fact that unless you grow up, unless you wake up and grow up, you will continue to live your life as a child. This is a very important thing for people to understand. If you look at the news, the reason that things are the way they are is because there is 7.5 billion children playing with atomic weapons. That's why things are scary, right? When you listen to some of the things that politicians say, people who have their finger on the button, that's scarifying, right? But then that's true in our lives as well, right? If you're going to be brutally honest, right? If you pay attention to your emotions and you realize how childish you can be emotionally, how childish you can be, right? Then you realize you're in big trouble unless you wake up and grow up and become mature as an adult. Understand what it means to be an adult. Understand what it means to be able to actually love instead of what people consider love to be, which is not love at all. So that's the thing, you have to understand what's at stake. You have to understand that and that's why people go to the extremes that they go to in terms of going to a monastery and living, or living in a cave, right? Because they feel that no matter what it is, no matter what it takes, I've got to go do that, because the alternative is that I don't have a life. The alternative is that all I am is a mind and a brain that's on automatic playing. Right? And the thoughts are thinking you. One of my teachers said it this way: you think you're thinking thoughts? No, thoughts think you. You think you're having feelings? No, feelings are having you. That's more the description of what's actually happening, you know, that you're living in the world that your thoughts let you live in. You're living in the world that your feelings dictate, right? And so that's a small life. It's a small reactive life. It's a fear-based life. There's no possibility of happiness. This is the stuff you got to get in, you know. There's no possibility of happiness. There's no possibility of fulfillment or satisfaction. There's no possibility of being at ease. And as you get older and as the body ages, you will suffer more and more. And death will be and death will be something that you're terrified of. That's what you have to not want to have in order to deal with what it takes to wake up. You know, you've got to really face things. That's why the Buddha said life is suffering. He didn't mean that it was inevitably suffering, you know, that it had to be suffering, but he said that life is suffering given the way you're relating to it. Given who you're being in life, life is suffering. And then he went on to say that the essential source of suffering is desire. What's that mean? Well, desire means that the human condition is such that as we go through our lives without necessarily realizing it, we're constantly in conflict with the way things are, aren't we? Constantly in conflict. That's the childishness that is there. I want what I want when I want it. I don't like it when I don't get what I want. I don't like it when it rains. I don't like it. I don't like my job because I don't make enough money. I don't like my car because it's too old. I don't like my body because it's not as nice as other bodies. Can you get the world that's going to give you? You know, all of this resistance and all this conflict with the way it is. It's too hot, it's too cold. That's the human existence. Constant judge and evaluation. That's the way the human mind works. Constantly judging and evaluating. And this is the source of suffering. Because what maturity is, what being awake is recognizing that the way it is the way it is. To want it to be different than that is stupid, is childish, right? And not only is it stupid and childish, but when you allow it to be the way it is and you're being with the way it is, there's no problem. When you're being with the way it is and letting it be that way, and by the way, awareness doesn't let it be that way. Awareness just is there. It's not practicing allowing things to be the way they are. It's just there. So when you're being with the way it is, as who you actually are, there's no problem, because you're not identifying yourself as a person, and you're not relating to what's going on as if it should be any different than it is. See, can you see how that problems disappear? There's no problem. And then things just go on from there. They just happen the way they happen. So the bottom line, look, the bottom line is, more than anything, to be willing to engage with the situation that you find yourself in. You know, to be willing to engage in it, to be willing to become a student of reality. To be a student of reality, to be interested in consistently learning as much as you can about how to stay awake. You know, using whatever is available. Like this is the breath work that I've talked about here, right? That's a technique, right? The breath is a technique that is, you can find it in most all spiritual teachings, right? In some form or another, paying attention to the breath, working with the breath, practicing certain patterns of breathing, right? So there are a lot of things that you can do to actually bring presence, bring more awareness, get out of your head, get out of the thought process, you know, get out of being in an emotional state all the time. And get used to the experience that the awareness is there all the time. Peace is a constant. You can't become peaceful. That's not peace, because becoming peaceful includes the possibility of not being peaceful. Awareness is always peaceful. And it's always, the peace of awareness is always there. Silence, it's like silence, right? Silence is always there, isn't it? Even when there's sound, silence is there. Same thing with peace. Peace is always there. Even when there's agitation, peace is there. But we pay attention to the sound, we pay attention to the agitation, and when we're paying attention to the sound or the agitation, we're ignoring the silence and the peace. When you pay attention to thoughts and feelings, you're ignoring the awareness that that's happening in, even though it's there all the time. See, when you look at it like that, can you see that it's really it's a real possibility to experience this? It's a real possibility, but you've got to stay on the case. You know, you can't visit it. You can't be a tourist in this. You can't just have it be an interesting thing that you're learning about. That's not going to do anything. It might be nice to talk about at parties, but it's not going to make much of a difference in your life. And it's like one of the meditation teachers said, that, you know, meditating and waking up is preparing for your worst day. Okay. Have a good day.